Elon Musk recently announced that he had found that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, had spent $59 million in 1 week on putting illegal aliens into luxury hotels in New York City. You represent a state that was ravaged by hurricanes a few months back, and there are people still not recovered from that. What do you make of that?
We're extremely angry and extremely disturbed. In fact, I have a letter that actually went out yesterday morning that we got signers from all of our delegation in North Carolina to Secretary Noem, actually demanding that we get some answers to some questions. I mean, we want to know what is the current status of this $59 million that's been sent to New York.
Welcome to No Border, No Country. We have a special guest today. Congressman Mark Harris represents the 8th District in North Carolina, and he's with us today. Congressman, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm honored to be a part of this.
Thank you. You've been a vocal supporter of President Trump's immigration agenda. We're a few weeks into his administration now. How would you assess things are going so far? What have been some of the successes in your mind, and what are some of the things that are going to be challenges going forward?
Well, I think there's certainly been some successes that have happened. I think that we are seeing the things that he promised on the campaign trail coming to pass. One of the first bills he signed into law was the Lake and Riley Act, which again was important. I know it was a priority for him on the campaign trail, and I was grateful that we were able to deliver that out of the U.S. House, out of the Senate, and put it on his desk. So that was certainly a great victory. I think the fact that he's getting his cabinet all confirmed and in place is a very, very important step in the process. Of course, Tom Homan is doing a wonderful job, I believe, in really moving forward with the president's agenda and getting Secretary Noem in place as well with Homeland Security is going to be important. She's certainly committed to the work that's going on to secure the border. So all of those, I think, are great victories. Obviously, we've had some setbacks with people lending aid, if you will, to illegal aliens by getting word to them that ICE agents were going to be coming in. But I think Pam Bondi, who has now stepped into the Department of Justice, is absolutely committed to enforcing the law and making sure that people that are involved in such activities as that are going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And so really, I think that, we sometimes forget because it's happening so fast and furious that we're only really 3 weeks into this administration, less than a month, and we're just over a month into this new Congress. And so there's lots of bills that are on the floor. One that I've introduced even today called No Asylum for Criminals Act that is trying to deal with the issue that the last administration just threw the barn door open and took classifications such as asylum that are very important for folks that are persecuted. But this last administration threw the door open and allowed people to come in under the guise of asylum. And now, as a result of that, today, we have more than 1 million asylum cases in backlog. That there may be a few legitimate, but there's plenty of illegitimate cases. And that's a real problem. So we've got to clean that up. And I think that going into the criminal record of those that are trying to get in under asylum will be a good way to clean that out and clean out the backlog. So those are some of the things. I know I've talked a long time for your first question, but yeah, I get on a roll.
So tell us a little bit more about this bill. I'm a former trial attorney with ICE and former immigration judge. So generally speaking, people with aggravated felony convictions don't qualify for asylum. So what does this do? How does this enhance the protections for the American public?
Well, I think one of the key ways it's going to enhance for the American public is by weeding out these individuals that have come in under the last administration. that they have a criminal background, they have a criminal record, whether it be a felony or a misdemeanor. And I do think the fact that it is going to allow us to clean out many of these cases. I mean, I deal with folks, even in my district, who have a legitimate situation of asylum. The dad from Venezuela, the dad was actually imprisoned. The family was at risk with all kinds of persecution that was going on. The family came out in 2019. The dad actually was in prison and tortured. The family came out in 2019, as I said, which was under the Trump administration, and they were given a date for an asylum hearing. Well, then COVID hit. And so suddenly, when COVID hit, everything changed and their date was pushed back and then immediately went awry. Well, then in 2023, under the Biden administration, they come up with this temporary protected status. And suddenly, no dates were given. And so they've been waiting and waiting. And now the new administration has come in, and you've got a situation where they say, we're dropping that temporary protected status, and they're going to have to they're here illegally, and that becomes a real danger for those that are have a legitimate situation that are waiting an asylum hearing, but they can't get to it because we've got this million person backlog because of the last administration just let anybody come in, it seemed, under asylum. And so this is a way of I think, being a real service to weed out those, not only finding these criminals and saying that no more are we going to allow violent criminals to get into this country. And asylum has been one of the key ways that the previous administration allowed them in. And we're going to put a stop to that.
Elon Musk recently announced that he had found that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, had spent $59 million in 1 week on putting illegal aliens into luxury hotels in New York City. You represent a state that was ravaged by hurricanes a few months back, and there are people still not recovered from that. What do you make of that? How are these agencies gotten so far off their mission where they're pouring money into illegal aliens when they're not helping the people they're supposed to help?
Well, I got to tell you, we're extremely angry and extremely disturbed. In fact, I have a letter that actually went out yesterday morning that we got signers from all of our delegation in North Carolina to Secretary Nome, actually demanding that we get some answers to some questions. I mean, we want to know, what is the current status of this $59 million that's been sent to New York. We want an explanation of a $59 million expenditure allocated for illegal alien housing, including the organization responsible for making the request and purchasing the housing. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And from a congressional standpoint, we're asking those questions. We're putting it in writing. We're making formal requests. I'm sure we're going to have some hearings in the days ahead. I have the opportunity of sitting on the Judiciary Committee, and I think that we're going to be having a number of hearings looking into these issues. And it's criminal. And when I look at Western North Carolina, and I look at people that have been without housing, and then I look at FEMA itself, that in early January, at the height of cold weather in Western North Carolina, we're sending letters to people saying that you're going to have to move out of your hotel that we put you in temporarily. I mean, that's criminal. And so there were moves that were made then. Congress stepped in. I know Congressman Chuck Edwards is there in Asheville and represents that district, and he got very engaged. Congresswoman Virginia Fox also represents many of those mountain counties. I don't have any of those mountain counties in my particular district that was affected by the hurricane, but all of us in North Carolina have been working overtime. Churches, ministries from across the country have been involved. And it's just a slap in the face to the American people to see that millions, $59 million. And look, there's no secret. It's being made very clear by Elon Musk work, the Doge effort, that the Biden administration was doing everything they could to get cash out the door before the inauguration of Donald Trump. They were doing everything they could to spend, spend, spend. And it's, people have got to be called into account for that.
You brought up a great point earlier. There is a lot of garbage in the immigration system right now. I think there's over 1 million cases backlogged at USCIS. There's anywhere, depending upon who you ask, 3 to 6 million backlogged at the immigration court. So what kind of plans does Congress have to improve the way the whole system works, expand the immigration court, anything like that? What have you guys got cooking up on the Hill?
Well, I think one of the things that's going on right now is conversation as we pass I know the budget committee today is meeting on budget resolution, is before them. They're doing markup today. And hopefully we're going to be able to get started with that. There's no question that the border is the first priority that we're looking at. And you hear a lot of conversation about budget reconciliation and whether it's one big, beautiful bill, as it's been called, or whether it's going to be two bills. And I think we've all come to the conclusion that whether it's one or two, we just want results, and we want to see those results happen quickly. But I will say this, as far as the border is concerned, nobody seems to disagree that whether it's one big, beautiful bill or two bills, border's got to be first. It's got to be in the priority. We've got to put into President Trump's hands all the tools that he needs to be able to do the things with deportation. Whether it's extra beds that we've got to get in the border that's going to detain these folks before we get them sent back to where they're going. There's just a number of things that have got to be done. I know Tom Homan has been asking for help, and I think that is certainly a priority of this Congress, is to get him the help that he needs as quickly as possible to be able to do the work that they want to do.
Congressman, you mentioned Tom Homan, who is our former senior fellow here at Early. He had been critical of Pope Francis's criticisms of the Trump administration's immigration policies. People may not know this, but in addition to your job as congressman, you're also a pastor in North Carolina. What would you say is the faith-based defense of our current immigration policies that the president is trying to get through?
Listen, your statement says it all. No border, no country. I mean, as I study the scriptures, I've been a pastor, as you mentioned, for 36 years. And there's no question, when you read Old Testament, New Testament, it's very clear that in order to have a country, you've got to have borders. It's also important to understand that if you're going to have a nation, you got to be a nation of laws. And law and order is absolutely biblical. And I believe that, that to me is all the defense you need for why we're doing what we're doing. We have unfortunately seen things running rampant. Look, this is a nation that has always been a nation of immigrants and taking care of immigrants, inviting immigrants to come in, but to come in by the legal steps. That's the reason we talk about, asylum. That's the reason we talk about things like this. We've had places within our laws to be able to take care of those who were hurting, take care of those who needed to come in. But there is a system, and has been a system, that must be followed of laws. And so that to me is the faith-based answer to any of it. And really, the tragedy of all of it is the chaos that is created and the lack of order that comes to your culture when you're not following the law. And I said all along that, and even when I was running for office, this issue of the border is so critical. It touches every other aspect of life in America. You want to talk about national security? You got to talk about the border. You want to talk about education? You have to talk about the border. You want to talk about the spending and the national debt? You got to talk about the border, because we are spending out the wazoo in many of our areas and putting the pressure on our local and state governments to try to manage this chaos that's been created by the federal government and the lack of maintaining our borders. So, no, listen, not going to get anything from me other than that we've got to follow the laws that we have in this nation and recognizing that we are a nation that cares for people, loves people. America does more to care for people around the world than any other country. And maintaining our borders is not something we have to apologize for.
So there's been a lot of discussion recently, for obvious reasons, about keeping the bad guys out. But the flip side of this, of course, is getting the good guys in. And one of the things I've regularly encountered when I was a private bar immigration attorney is there are people all over the place, particularly in Western Europe, that have capital, that have skills, and that have no criminal record. And they can't get here when they want to come here. So how do we fix that problem?
Well, again, I think that when we get this situation that's been created back under control, we'll be able to get back to a normal routine of doing just what you're suggesting, finding those folks that want to come here legally. I mean, the best and the brightest, as you say, then what they bring to the table and wanting to integrate into American culture, an American system. I think that's important. Again, nobody that is taking a strong stand on the border, from my perspective, is in any way wanting to, as you said, keep people out, other than those that are illegal and don't need to be in our country. And we need to work toward finding ways that we can bring people in that will follow the laws that we've had. And I think that's one of the things that happened during the last administration. They kept trying to say to Congress, well, pass this law and pass this law and grant asylum for this and do that. Well, the reality was such chaos was being created that you've got to clean up your mess before you can begin to really put good things in place that are going to make the difference that you're talking about.
And I think it's worth pointing out that one of the key people in trying to fix all this is Elon Musk, who is himself an immigrant to the United States.
Yes, yes, and he has an incredible amount of wisdom. And listen, we need to pray for Elon Musk. We need to pray for his safety. This man is doing incredible work. He's helping President Trump. He's pointing out things. Listen, he's just got a lot of skills, and I think what he is doing is an incredible service to this nation, and I greatly appreciate it. I do know that my colleagues on the left, they're screaming bloody murder. They are, I mean, their hair is on fire. I can't sit in a hearing. I've been in multiple hearings in these first couple of weeks, whether it was with education and workforce or whether it was with judiciary. And yesterday we had a long hearing. I think we were probably 5 hours or more in this hearing that was talking about censorship and the industrial complex of censorship that was going on in the previous administration. All my colleagues on the left could talk about was Elon Musk. I mean, all they could do was just try to hurl insults and throw stones at what he's doing. And it's so obvious they don't have facts on their side. They don't have truth on their side. So when you don't, all you do is throw out accusations. And to be honest, I heard one, I was in an interview and they played a clip for me of an individual that was calling for violence. And that's what the left tends to do. Again, when they don't have truth, when they don't have facts, they call for violence. That kind of rhetoric is extremely dangerous. And again, he's just exposing so much, whether it be at the Department of Education, USAID. And when you start exposing those kind of things and there is no defense for it, then that's when people start acting crazy. And we need to be very aware of that and very careful about that.
Congressman, I know we're short for time, but in closing, I just had one more question for you. On your X account, you had said recently that it's crucial that Congress enshrine President Trump's executive orders into law as soon as possible. With regard to the immigration executive orders, how heavy a lift do you think that's going to be?
Well, I think, the big lift that we have in enshrining these executive orders, I think we can get them out of the House. I think we can get them out quickly. Of course, we're spending a lot of time right now on reconciliation and budget, which we have to do. And one reason I think we're doing that is because we have an opportunity to transform a lot of things with budget and budget reconciliation. Because when we go to the House or to the Senate, we, under budget reconciliation, can simply need the majority, 51 votes. Everything that's policy, whether it be border policy or anything else, it requires 60 votes over in the Senate in order to get cloture, in order to get it passed. That's just a challenge. It's 53-47 over there. That's how the process works. I feel confident that we can continue to move bills like we did the Lake and Riley Act. We even picked up some Democrats that came over in the House, and that managed to get through the Senate with a cloture vote. Many of these issues, I think we can move in the House. I don't know what the Senate's going to do with it. I'm hopeful. I think we've got to push. We've got to hear the outcry from the American people. The Senate is moving on the cabinet, the president's cabinet. They're getting those nominations through. We're going to have probably RFK Jr. today, I think, is going to go through. And then I think we'll hear Kash Patel. We're going to find out today about his with the FBI. So there's a lot of things that are getting through the Senate. That's critical. But I think the lift is going to come in the Senate in getting many of these executive orders codified.
Congressman Mark Harris, thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you for being such a strong voice on the Hill for these issues.
Well, thank you all for what you're doing, for the impact you're making, and listen, let's just keep making America great again.
Thanks
Definitely.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Matt, it's good to have a member of Congress joining us and giving some pretty strong opinions in defense of President Trump and a lot of the causes we hold dear.
Yeah, I think things have changed from the last administration. We now have a president that cares about the border and is interested in seeing the immigration laws enforced. And it sounds like he's being backed up by folks on the Hill, particularly in Congress. Clearly, we have a little ways to go in the Senate. But it's hard for anyone, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, to push back against something like the Lake and Riley Act. So hopefully we'll see some movement on a lot of these bills up on the Hill and see a lot of these things the president has done by executive order enshrined into law.
I asked him that question about the Pope because I knew his background as a pastor, and I thought that would be really good to hear it from him because for so long the anti-borders crowd has played on religion as their backup, saying, well, what kind of Christian are you? You don't want to let immigrants in? And he gave a excellent retort to that, I thought.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, it's pretty hypocritical because the Vatican is unusual in that it is a sovereign nation. It's surrounded by a wall, and the Pope recently announced that people who were inappropriately breaching the wall or coming into the Vatican without permission were going to be prosecuted and jailed. So it's monumentally hypocritical for him to be telling sovereign leaders of other nations that they should be taking whatever immigrants show up on their shores, regardless of whether they've entered legally or not, while he's saying, that's good for you, but not for the Vatican. I'm following my own policy where I'm going to enforce my borders.
I think Dana White, who's a friend of President Trump, should promote and organize a live debate between Tom Homan and Pope Francis. Pay-per-view, it'll melt the internet.
I think it'd be awesome, absolutely awesome. It's interesting because shortly after the Pope said that, there's been a whole bunch of coverage of churches that are claiming that they're acting as sanctuaries and they have complete misinformation. They're posting notices on their doors saying that ICE can't enter the premises without a warrant signed by a judge. The Church Law Center of the United States recently published a piece saying, this isn't true. This is not medieval England, and churches have no right to act as sanctuaries for lawbreakers. So it's kind of interesting to watch the sort of interaction between religion and immigration and some of the misinformation that's going around about that.
It was also good to have a congressman from North Carolina here because That state, as we said, has been ravaged by natural disaster. And to see FEMA spending tens of millions of dollars on illegal aliens, they're a disaster relief agency. What are they doing?
Well, I think in that particular situation, they were funding a disaster in the making. I mean, New York City has had an unprecedented wave of crime that even, radical publications like Time and Newsweek have started to admit might be connected to the large number of illegal aliens that have been welcomed to New York. But it's even more mind-boggling when you stop and think that Kamala Harris told everybody in North Carolina, oh, yeah, FEMA's going to come through for you. Here's $750, which then the reporting all indicated it was virtually impossible to get the $750. The congressman was saying that FEMA's sending out notices to North Carolinians saying, hey, the hotel that FEMA has been paying for is about to expire. You need to find new digs. As we're paying for illegal alien criminals, not just to stay in hotels, but to stay in luxury hotels in lower Manhattan. You and I can't afford to stay in some of the hotels that the federal government in the state of New York was putting up illegal rapists and murderers in. I mean, that's mind-boggling. How does that happen in the United States?
It's also very revealing how the anti-borders crowd, they're going straight with the Saul Alinsky tactics. They're personalizing, making it about Elon Musk and looking into him and criticizing him personally. It's not so much who he is or how he's doing things. It's really what he's finding, and he's revealing the game. He's showing what's going on behind the curtain, and they don't like it.
Well, it's interesting watching the tactic, too, because as you know, we here at Early did a lot of the investigative reporting work on the Laken Riley murder, and we actually filed an information request with Athens-Clarke County, and we uncovered emails where the Athens-Clarke mayor was saying that Laken Riley was a public relations problem that was interfering with that jurisdiction's sanctuary plans. So it's personal when it's something that they care about, but when it's not, they're willing to depersonalize the murder by an illegal alien of a promising young woman who was in nursing school looking to serve her community. They'll turn that into something that, well, that's a statistic. It's one thing that happened, but really the large number of illegal aliens are great people that are contributing to America. On the other hand, Elon Musk, who's an immigrant, who actually happens to be following the law and trying to uncover government waste and abuse, now is, the second coming of the Antichrist, because he's pointed out that Democrats were funneling money to all kinds of unholy, unlawful, and inappropriate causes, using taxpayer money and the mechanism of the federal government to do the funneling.
Congressman Harris was just sworn in last month, and it seems like this time around with Trump's second administration, there's more energy among his supporters in Congress. They're much more on the same page with him, and as you saw with Congressman Harris, they're fighting for his cause with an energy that I don't think was present last time.
Well, I think it's become abundantly clear to President Trump this time around that the other side is willing to play dirty. I mean, he did exactly the same thing when he came into office the last time, and yet he was the victim of mudslinging and all kinds of underhanded, dirty tactics to try and bring everything that he was doing to a halt. And this time around, I think he's learned his lesson, and I think he has lined up his supporters. I think he has reached out to experts in all the different fields he's dealing with. I know he's done it in immigration. I mean, he's got Tom Homan, who was a fellow here, working for him, in charge of the border. So I think it's a different vibe, and I think that I think the new Trump administration has gone into this with its eyes wide open and said, geez, maybe everybody's not on America's side. And maybe we need to cater specifically to the people who care about America and want to make America great again and do business that way this time around.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to irli.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to irli.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.